Happy Wednesday, everybody, and thanks for checking into our latest Traded Black podcast. I'm your host, Chad Dales. Lots going on here as we get set for a new episode. And long story short, sorry about the technical difficulties there, but long story short, we got Beena Goldenberg, CEO of Organigram, on in just a moment to talk about her latest earnings. I know right now the stock's hit a little bit here the last day or two, but we'll get more understanding of the latest numbers and, more importantly, what the growth strategy is for this company moving forward. I know a lot of people are anxious to see what her feedback was and what the company is expected to do moving forward. As well, Trent Woloveck from Jushi is going to come in. Why? He's got a big understanding and background in the Virginia market, which is where the newly appointed head of the DEA, Terry Coleas, spent a lot of time and actually developed a relationship with Jushi and Trent. So he's got some insight on who he is and what we can expect next and his impact really on rescheduling. So with that, let's welcome in AV here on a Wednesday. Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's been another busy week since we signed off on Monday.
Yeah, I know.
So
that's putting it mildly. We had some RFK news. That's advanced a little bit. So where's that sit right now?
He's now going to a final vote.
Final vote.
He's in. Tulsi got confirmed. RFK is a shoo-in.
And that final vote, is that tomorrow or Friday? Will be at some point.
I'm not sure. I don't think they've announced it yet. I've been watching Mike Benn's videos about what's going on in Afghanistan and abroad, where hopefully he kind of blows the roof off of what's going on or what's been perpetuating the illicit market from an institutional standpoint. So that kind of hijacked my afternoon.
You can't hide anything in today's world. That is mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's what happens when you get someone that goes into government, or not goes into government, but gets put in front of the establishment, such as Elon and his gang of engineers.
I know.
We'll call them. Let's see what they uncover. Hopefully they don't rob the treasury and leave us worse off than they found us. But nothing was going to uncover any of this nonsense short of somebody that's not a bureaucrat or a government appointee going in and really just looking under the hood.
It's a real life Ozark, only in Afghanistan and poppies. But you know what? We'll save that for a later time. But in the meantime, let's welcome back to the podcast the CEO of Organigram, which trades on the ticker symbol under the NASDAQ, under the ticker symbol OGI, Beena Goldenberg, back to the podcast. Love the t-shirt. How are things?
Great. How are you?
Yes, we're going to need one of those. But, good to see you. I know last couple of days as far as trading hasn't been ideal. And it's not just you. It's for the sector as a whole. But all in all, like I'm going to get into specific numbers, but, how would you best define your latest numbers? And really, with obviously Maltese financials now being consolidated into your numbers, how would you best define like where things sit right now and what you just reported?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. And I'll start off by saying in the quarter, we only had 3 weeks of Motif numbers in our quarter. So really the big news is going to be next quarter when we have the full consolidated earnings of Motif in. But what I would say about the quarter is we had a good quarter relative to same period a year ago.
Yep.
What the unfortunate part is that the consensus out on the street sort of missed the point that there's seasonality in this business. We all know that summertime, you're going to have a lot more used flower pre-rolls. I mean, everybody's out in festivals and enjoying the outside. And we always have a dip after our Q4, which is the summer months. July to September, and then it drops down. So, I think when you look at the same period, October, November, December, year over year, we were up revenue 17%. We were up gross margin up 2 basis points, and we were up in EBITDA. So over the same period last year, but sequentially we were down, and that was the reaction. I think you look at any CPG industry that is maturing, and the cannabis industry right now in Canada is maturing. We're in lower single digit growth. You're going to have seasonality impacts, and we spent a lot of time trying to help people understand that. And it doesn't mean we will have a great Q4 again in fiscal year 25. We have our trajectory is feeling good. We're going to have growth throughout the year over year, and growth fourth quarter over fourth quarter. So feeling pretty good about the numbers. We believe we'll over deliver versus last year's numbers. But, unfortunately, the miss on consensus for seasonality, people saw it as a miss, and that's what's impacting our stock right now. I think it'll come back, right? And there's, as more news comes in, it'll come back.
Yeah, listen, like everybody does like this story. I think maybe you're implying is that Canada should adopt global warming and have summer all year round. Is that what we suggest? But
that would be
anyway,
great.
Yeah, I know. But listen, 17 increase in net revenue to 42.7 million for Q1, which was up from 36.5 million the same period last year. International sales grew up to 2.3 million, and adjusted EBITDA rose to 1.4 million from 0.1 million. So one of the things I noticed and it grabbed my attention, obviously, with this acquisition is that you're now the #1 position in Canada's adult use market, followed by, as we said before, the acquisition of Motif Labs. So what's the strategy to increase market share and, more importantly, maintain pole position in these categories?
Yeah, absolutely. So to start off with, the acquisition of Motif was great because it was highly complementary. We didn't have a real position in the vape market, and they were big leaders. So now, we have a 22% market share in vapes. They have a strong position in infused infused pre-rolls. They have a strong position. So that helped bolster our performance. I think really the two businesses together combined, we have #1 position in milled flower. We're #1 in pre-rolls. We're #1 in vapes. We're #3 in gummies. Like, we're in the ready to consume categories, which are the growing categories.
Yeah.
And I know we're talking about share price, and I know the share price ran about 18% following the Aurora news. You've got a big presence in Germany via the Sanity Group investment. Strategically looking at the business, I know that we had talked about the excise tax in Canada. I don't want to say heavily weighing on the business, as it's a cost of doing business in Canada. But how are you thinking with the business strategically on, let's say, allocating to the Canadian market versus abroad moving forward, especially from a numbers perspective?
Yeah, listen, we're excited about our relationship with Sanity Group, and we think that we will start to see increasing international sales, and that's important. International sales don't come with the same excise impact, so they're more profitable. But the problem is there will be price compression on international too. And what we see is a lot of players in Canada have left the flower market in Canada and have gone to international, and they've left the void in the Canadian marketplace. And what's exciting for us is the opportunity to build our brands, capitalize on that void, build our brands, because brands are sticky. Years ago, they said there were no brands in cannabis, but we have two very beloved brands in our Shred and our Box Hot. The two brands combined had $385 million in retail sales in the last 12 months.
Wow.
They're big brands in Canada, and we want to stand behind those brands. So we're going to manage that growth international. It's important. It's good margin, and we have the demand with our partners, but we're not leaving Canada so soon. We want to have that pole position, that market share leadership, and really drive this. At some point in the future, there will be excise tax reform, and that the profitability will come back to the Canadian market, but we will have the brands. So it's balancing those two. Absolutely necessary.
And you had mentioned some of your peers, let's say, focusing more so on international exports versus domestic business. Has that changed the pricing dynamics as it relates to the price of flower, both from a wholesale and a retail perspective in Canada? And what trends are you seeing, if any?
Yeah. So, a couple of years ago, everybody talked about this big mountain of cannabis in Canada that didn't have a home for it. The market has completely shifted to completely opposite dynamic. There's not enough flower in the Canadian market. So much has left Canada internationally that now we're seeing prices going up in Canada. It's really interesting, and we've taken pricing on our Big Bag of Buds brand. We're out there. We've taken pricing in a couple of markets on that brand. If you don't have enough flower, pricing goes up. That's supply and demand, right?
You learn something new every single day on this podcast. But yep, I didn't realize that. Well, that makes sense. But at one time you'd think that would not be possible, seeing that there wasn't enough cannabis being provided here in Canada. But we did talk about international markets. Like you and I touched on this before the podcast began. We saw Aurora, another Canadian company. They had some great numbers last week pertaining to their international numbers. We saw really the whole sector and a lot of Canadian LPs, especially yours, as Anthony alluded to, just really climbed up off top of that. some of the European numbers are still work in progress for you. But, with that, you highlighted there was only 1 month with motif numbers on your latest earnings. As far as the European market, I know that you have, the EU GMP facility in Moncton. You're waiting for certification related to that. Once that is certified, what does that, I guess, present as far as to you in the international market, and where does that sit right now?
Yeah, so very interesting. First of all, we had our audit back in November. We received the report in January. We're just working through the process, so we're hoping we'll get this certification by the spring. So as soon as we get that certification, a couple things happen. Right now, we currently sell internationally a GACP flower that has to go through a converter to make it EU GMP compliant, which means our flower goes to perhaps a player in Portugal, and then they have to process the last step, and then it sells off to Germany. By getting EU GMP, we take out the middleman. We get the flower going straight from us to Germany. So number one, without the middleman, we could charge a higher price, and Sanity Group at the other end gets a better price because we take out the middleman. It's a great thing. So we're looking forward to having that supply chain solved. But number two, and the pricing go up. But number two, when we did the $21 million investment in the Sanity Group, one of the agreements was once we get EU GMP, they would get 30% of their flower requirements from Organigram. So that goes up too. And remember, Germany has seen a 4-fold increase in cannabis sales since April 1st when decriminalization was announced.
It's grown that much that fast.
That's right. Right now, they can't get enough flower. So not surprising that an Aurora or other companies are out there selling to international because the demand is high and they can't get it. But once the supply chain gets solved and EU GMP goes right through, we will start seeing consecutive quarters of increased international growth.
How are the dynamics around the supply and demand with the EU? A lot of the people that have been here since the early days of the Canadian LPs are used to seeing supply agreements potentially between the LPs. Are you making supply agreements with the European companies, or are they just gobbling up as much flower as you can service them, and the demand is just that high?
Yes, so we do have some strategic partnerships, and we've tried to do that. And because it's a medical market, it tends to be strain specific. So you establish a relationship with that patient on that strain, and then they need to buy that strain again, right? So there is a certain amount of strategic partnership, but there is such a demand right now that I think some of the players in Germany are just taking product from wherever it could come from. There's product coming in from Colombia and product coming in from South Africa. Obviously, the higher end, the product that's coming out of Canada, which, we've been growing it for a long time. The quality, the bud structure, the potency and terpenes are a different class, but there's a value play happening in Germany on the low end because there's such a demand. So it's interesting, and as I expect it'll happen over time. That demand will happen, people will get a lot of money, and then the supply chain will catch up, and then there will be likely some stabilization.
Right. Sounds like we need to get to Germany to see what's going on, but that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
How costly is that with that middle person, like you said, in Portugal? Because you eliminate that's promising to say the least.
No, absolutely. So we will see a price benefit because we'll get pricing up, and our customer Sanity will get a discount. It's like the greatest thing when you take out a middleman. So, it's a pretty interesting opportunity with Germany. And the interesting thing with Sanity Group is besides the medical market, they've applied to 6 jurisdictions in Germany to do the recreational pilot project in those facilities. So 3 jurisdictions in Berlin, then in Frankfurt, Dusseldorf, and Bremen. And if those come through, and we believe there's a good chance of at least 3 of those coming through that they applied to before December, if they come through, all of a sudden we have an opportunity to sell some of our brands and maybe some of our IP through the recreational shops that might have lesser restrictions than the medical market. So we're pretty excited about exploring that too and bringing brands to that market.
So part of your story has been the relationship with Bats. I know they've invested a healthy amount of capital to date. You have another tranche that's about to hit. I think it's $41.5 million. That's earmarked at a $3.22 price, if I'm not mistaken. Walk me through, like, what's the strategy here for the rest of the year, I guess, as far as, like, let's say M&A and growth. Are you looking domestically? Are you looking abroad? Is this, let's say, earmarked for future growth in the U.S.? How are you thinking in terms of expansion?
Yes. So when we got the follow-on investment from BAT, it was defined as a third of it would be for general working purposes, capital purposes. And then the other 2/3 was going to be dictated to a Jupiter investment pool that was very much strategically focused on international expansion and predominantly around the US. So while we did the investment in Sanity as one of those Jupiter investments, certainly this final tranche is going to be fully directed towards international, specifically the US. So when you say, what are we looking at doing? We certainly intend to get into the hemp Delta-9 business in the US. It's growing, lots of positive messages. I think that the opportunity there is ripe, and we want to be a player there. So it's one of the ways we could get into the US in a compliant way while we still have our NASDAQ and TSX listing. And we've seen some of our other competitors who've gotten into that. And we hope that we could bring some of our IP. So we talked last time about our nano emulsification fast technology. And that was part of something that came out of the BAT relationship that we have, the Homeland collaboration. And we could introduce that technology into some products in the hemp Delta-9 space in the US. Gives us something differentiated to come into the market with. So we're excited and we're looking at that.
That was actually my follow-up question. I was like, I'm assuming if you're exploring the Delta-9 hemp-derived space, I'm assuming the form factors are going to fall into the gummy and beverage category versus something like a THC flower or another form factor where you can actually apply that IP that's already been built out to those products to differentiate yourself and really enter the market from a competitive advantage.
Correct.
Okay.
When we look at the timeline, the final tranche with BAT, like, is this standard as far as the timeline of them investing? Has it been slower than expected? Is there any reason behind that, or should people read much into that?
No. When we first announced the follow-on investment, which was in November, and it needed to be approved by our board in January, but we had identified 3 tranches. And one was in January, and one was in August, and one was the following February. And they're meeting exactly that schedule. It's going along as planned. And really, we invested off the first, we did a small investment in open book extracts in the US. We did the Sanity Group investment. So we are looking at places that we want to invest this money, and it's focused on international, including the US.
Good to know. Well, you brought up some points about Germany fourfolding in the matter of, like, since April, which is incredible. One of our listeners actually is from the UK, Mark Landers, who's incredible, but he wrote, cannabis was removed from the narcotics list in Germany. Now any doctor can prescribe cannabis, something that people should understand a little bit more as to why it's growing so rapidly. It's good to see, right?
Right. But the other interesting stat is when you look at the number of patients, cannabis patients in Germany relative to the population, right now it's sitting at about 0.5. And you look at Israel, it's 2.2.
Okay.
When you look at Australia, it's 4. So the more mature medical markets, it's much greater percentage of patients to overall population. And so all it says is there's lots more upside in Germany because you still have a small amount relative to those other markets that have had medical markets for a while.
What is there, 80 million in Germany? Around that population-wise, I think it's something along those numbers, but big market to say the least.
That's right.
Listen, love how you come on here, and really, we don't have to cut commercial breaks, so you can go in depth for 20 minutes and explain basically the latest earnings and what the numbers mean a little bit more there. But I hope everybody got a little bit more better understanding of what these numbers mean, but more importantly, what we can anticipate moving into the next quarter and the growth opportunities it presents. I know we did talk before Christmas about the excise tax, and I know there's probably an effort that's going on working with other Canadian LPs, but I know there's not much to update right there, but keep fighting the good fight and keep us updated on how that progresses, okay?
Will do.
All right.
Thanks,
Beena. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
One of the
You
nice.
were right on the money, 84 million.
Was it 84?
Yeah.
Should be on Showcase Showdown. Bob Barker.
That's a good statistic, that they're only 0.5% as far as the medical patient penetration goes, because ideally, I know the sweet spot in the States has been somewhere between 2.5% and 3%.
Yeah.
So it just shows that there is room for growth. Florida, I mean, we've got, I think, 23 million people and round about 900 and something thousand patients. So, I mean, we're hitting that 2.5% to 3% number right now. And we're the strongest medical market.
And I think the takeaway here too is that people were probably hoping and anticipating numbers similar to what Aurora was doing, but a good explanation to understand what the numbers are there. It's the reason why it ran last week. But again, Motif numbers, only 1 month, right? Let's see what the next quarter presents.
Yeah.
We get certification. You cut out that middle person in Portugal. There's plenty to go around for a lot of players in that space right now in the market of Germany.
And I think it's also important to note that Organigram and Aurora are fundamentally different businesses. Aurora is focused on medical and international. Organigram at home is focused on the rec consumer. They're an adult use cannabis brand. Beena alluded to that with Shreds and Box Hot. They're doing $385 million at retail. They've got healthy brands within Canada.
That surprised you when
focused on adult use.
That surprised you with the Canadian market, where 4 or 5 years ago there was so much weed being produced, and now it's the complete opposite?
I mean, you could argue that if the EU was online sooner, maybe Afria, T-God, Canopy, all of those big boys that just blew out their scale in terms of cultivation, maybe they had it right to a certain extent. They were just very, very early in terms of servicing, because the European story was nowhere near intact. And I think they were banking on the US loosening in terms of regulations to take that capacity.
You could have a good business model, but timing also is everything, right?
Yeah. Timing is everything.
Probably the most important thing.
It's very important. I know that all too well with my last venture in crypto.
We don't have to get into that, but I hear those stories. Yeah.
All
right, let's welcome in. He is the chief strategy, or I should say, hold on a second, chief strategy director from Jushi, which trades on the OTC under the ticker symbol JUSHF. Trent Woloveck, back to the podcast. It's probably been, I think, probably 18 months since we had you on last, but good to see you. How are things? Oh, I think you're on mute, my friend.
Mute.
All good.
You're right. I was on mute. But I'm well, Shad. Thanks for having me, Anthony. Good to see you guys. Glad I could be back on. And shed some light on kind of where the industry is headed. But OGI, she didn't mention Phylos, which is also a really cool thing they've been building here in the States. And it's an awesome company that Jushi utilizes. So
yeah, I know we were talking earlier this afternoon about you spent some time actually up in Moncton, and you've seen their facility, but some good country up there when you get into the New Brunswick area, especially in the summertime. But back in the Dennis Arsenal days and stuff like that, those are some original OG names that we haven't heard.
The good old days.
Yeah. But listen, wanted to have you on. I think there's a lot of people on here getting comments saying, hey, I showed up late. Any feedback on this new appointee of the head of the DEA, Terry Cole? And the reason why we wanted to have you on, we had a conversation with you earlier today. And to our delight, we actually found out how much that you know about him because of your Virginia footprint for Jushi. And this is where Terry Cole was not prior, but in his past jobs that he's had. He was within the state of Virginia, and you guys built a relationship with him in the CCA. So what can you share about who he is? Because on paper right now, everybody's freaking out thinking, this guy is totally against cannabis. He had a LinkedIn post that basically says everything, don't even ask me, I'm against cannabis. But I think it's important to share to people time and time again, and Pam Bondi even said this, that this is the third or fourth pick. And usually people that are third or fourth pick down the line aren't necessarily going to dictate what decisions are made under this Trump administration. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's point number one. There were 6+ names, being floated out there. I don't think this was, kind of public, figure number 2 or 3. And so, one could theorize that the other couple individuals maybe saw the writing on the wall based on what Trump had truthed, if that's the proper verb, back in October on the campaign trail about rescheduling safe banking, and then him voting yes on issue 3. And so, I think it's important to keep that in mind. I mean, look, the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi has made no bones about it.
Yeah.
If you're a department head and you don't follow through on the wishes of what the administration wants to do, we'll fire you. So I think that's kind of the backdrop of what folks should realize they're walking into when they are coming under and working as, whether it's the head of the DEA, head of whatever. They are going to be able to follow through on what President Trump has promised on the campaign trail. I mean, his slogan is "Promises made, promises kept," and he promised to do rescheduling, and he promised to do banking safer. So there's been no indication otherwise why he wouldn't follow through with those promises.
Yeah.
Have you had any interactions with him, or is there any sort of attribution to him, let's say, as far as the adult use market in Virginia not coming online? Has he had any influence on that market developing?
Well, let's set medical and adult use apart. So
okay,
let's start with medical. I think that's the one that's been pretty clear for the administration that's what they're focused on. In Virginia, the program was stood up in 2018, 2019. Folks started operating in 2020. We have been continuously progressing that medical market there for the last 5-6 years. We've had a medical cleanup bill. We've had expansion of stores, so on and so forth, product SKU types, everything you can kind of want from a medical market perspective. We've been able to implement that for the patients of Virginia. And so, we got a medical bill passed the first year the governor was in office. We got a medical bill passed the second year and the third year. I think we'll get one here on the fourth and final year. And so, I think that's an important distinction. We had, somebody in Brian Moran, who was the Virginia Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security. That's the title Mr. Cole, has carried until he gets confirmed. I'm assuming he'll stay in that seat. He was there for eight years. He was integral in setting up the CCA. Then he passed the torch to Bob Moser, who was there for 18 months. Terry Cole was under him. And then Terry Cole kind of took over on June 1st of 23. So, Terry Cole was the secretary that was overseeing the medical cannabis program in Virginia up until the CCA became an independent body, December 31st of 2024. So just this past, December. So
what's that say about him then, if he was overlooking the medical program?
I think look, he managed and ran and oversaw that program. I think it's important for people that see regulators, they can have a different opinion, a personal opinion. But again, we were continuously seeing, you can see it in our results, strong growth in the marketplace. People want to still come into the marketplace. Verano bought a license, Air won a license. This is something that we've talked about it being, our best market from a margin perspective. And so it's something that's a real state for us. And so, while, he may be a just say no guy, he's managed and oversaw a medical cannabis market for 18 months. I mean, he didn't just walk in and kill that market.
Yeah.
Far from it, quite frankly. It's expanded. So, I would just leave it at that.
Yeah, I hear you.
So you've been in this industry. I think you've actually been in this. You're one of the few guests I think has been in this industry longer than I have, since I got in this like 2014. So you've seen some shit with this develop, if we're being frank. Donald Trump, we've seen him kind of move fast and break things. You just made a pretty good distinction in the VA market as medical versus adult use. From a corporate strategy standpoint and just looking forward, do you think that there's any chance that they start to really gravitate towards medical cannabis and there's some sort of bifurcation, or we get some sort of curveball here where they kind of use that as the guise to enact reform and they can kind of just call it medical for what they're doing?
Look, I think it's been very clear. I'll put it this way. The distinction between medical and adult use. So I'll start with medical. Rescheduling is a medical
correct
process. I mean, there is science that backs it up. Is it addictive? Does it have some medical benefit? I mean, those are the two things that you have to prove to get it to move from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. Very simple, very easy. And, the HHS has come out with 150 plus pages walking through the science behind why it's not, super addictive, and there are medical benefits. I don't think anybody in their right mind can argue those two things. So, that one is a layup. We've heard a lot about the banking, the choke point, them coming in and breaking stuff. I think, that's also a pretty easy, straight up one for them to move forward with. And then, hey, he's a states' rights guy. What does the state want to do? The state can make a decision on how they enact a program for their state. Does that say medical only? Does that say medical and adult use? Does it say adult use only? That's what I foresee happening. It's a Goldilocks scenario for us, in my opinion. And so, look, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Pam Bondi, Terry Cole, everybody wants, and why they enacted the tariffs, and I'll put quotes around it for anybody that's just listening, is to stop the fentanyl trade. That's what they did that under. Now, we understand there's a whole different ball of wax, but every dollar that goes to the legal market is one less dollar for Mexican cartels and organized crime. That's just fact. That's what it is. And so Terry Cole, all he talked about when he was in Virginia was fentanyl. And look, fentanyl deaths, while they're still astronomically high in Virginia, they have gone down from 2020 to 2024. 2,000 people dying a year for fentanyl overdose is still 2,000 too many, but it was, 2,500 when they took over. And so, give some credit where some credit is due. But that's what I understand to be Terry Cole and the administration's focus from a enforcement perspective.
Yeah. We keep hearing a lot about fentanyl everywhere right now, but some of the language too is just that, well, cannabis is a gateway to harder drugs. But I think what we need to stop and pause and understand, and don't read in, but read between the lines. And what I mean by that is the fact that you've got potentially a rescheduling moment, and it's not just about, a gateway to other drugs. Yes, that's more about adult use, but if we could actually get a rescheduling and have proper research involved, it would open up the eyes, would it not, for a lot of this industry that could pave the way, to Anthony's point, to eventually get banking?
I think everybody who's been in the industry wouldn't still be in the industry if they didn't understand the power of the plant and how it helps certain people and helped a lot of people. Like if it's been a nuclear winter for 3+ years now. And so I would think that, we all understand, the value that is, cannabis and THC and all the 127 other cannabinoids that are part of this plant that we haven't even got to scratch the surface on, because, we've been spending and sending foreign aid through US, aid to, do a whole bunch of dirty things that have come, out over the last couple weeks, and rightfully so. And so, I think there are certain aspects to it that just ring true, that make this conversation, a lot more straightforward in the eyes of the administration. And look, this guy needs to go through confirmations. That doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take a couple weeks, probably closer to a month. And so, there's still, a long runway to go until, we know that this is certain and final.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think the focus is on cannabis from his standpoint.
No, and I hear that. Well, Mark Landers writes, cannabis is not a gateway drug, which I completely agree. It's not, but this is what a number of politicians keep reiterating. And my point is like, I get that if that's how you believe or feel, but we're talking about rescheduling. That's the first step. This is research involved. We're not even going down that road right now. But anyway, go on, finish your thought.
And I think it's important because we live in a world of technology, and I don't have any kids, but I'm kind of right on that age of the Twitters, the Facebooks, the Snapchats. I can read Reddit and all those fun aspects that a lot of kids can get on that are under the age of 21. It's not hard. And cannabis is viewed as a gateway drug because cannabis, it's great, it gets you high, it's a lot of fun from a recreational perspective, and then there's obviously a lot of medical benefits for folks as well, but it doesn't make you keep coming back as often as a drug dealer wants to continue to sell stuff. What comes back and is a lot more addictive? Powders, pills, heroin, cocaine, all that stuff. So the drug dealer will start you with weed and then get you into the other side. Oh man, I don't have any weed today. Can I kick you this? Can I kick you that's what's it's turned into. Then kids got on pain pills, and then they couldn't get the pain pills anymore. They flipped the heroin because that's the only same fix. I mean, I'm of the generation that was a real thing. I played, high school football. I played high school baseball, college baseball. Like, we popped pills like it was no big deal.
Yeah.
When we had pains. And so
another reason to get rid of
the lucky ones that didn't get hooked.
Yeah. Another reason to get rid of the black market, have zero relationship with the dealer.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Last time I checked, I've never sold cocaine, through my dispensaries. Yeah. And I can assure you that's 100% true. Quite frankly. So, it's pretty straightforward. Again, I just make the point because it's so pertinent. Every dollar that comes into the regulated market is another dollar less for the Mexican cartels.
Yeah.
And that's all we have to say. That's
an easy calculus.
That is the truth.
Yeah. I really do think that's the message. It's harm reduction and it's public safety. Legalizing cannabis is a public safety issue. It does make community.
There's a $4 billion market in the state of Virginia. $4 billion market. The industry for medical maybe does 500 million bucks. I don't know exactly, but I can kind of guesstimate. Yeah. That means that there's about $3.5 billion of cannabis being sold in Virginia. And you're telling me Glenn Youngkin, the governor, who's vetoed adult use twice, killed it once, vetoed it again. Today, we just passed through the legislature 2 adult use bills that are now going straight to his desk. And he has indicated he's more than likely to veto those. I don't understand how somebody who is, a through and through Republican who, is a very smart, ran, co-CEO of Carlyle, who God knows how much money they got from USAID, but that's for a different conversation.
We could get into that.
Do you have an hour? because like
Okay.
I could talk for more than an hour on that one. But
what do you make of some of the stuff that's starting to be, unveiled and what we're learning here?
it's everything we've known. Now it's just being tossed out to the public. Like if you if you didn't understand that a woman who teaches at NYU as the DEA administrator would flub up filling out a form for the ALJ, who filled out subpoenas wrong as the ALJ. Like that's just like, it's not even comprehend. That's like me forgetting to put my name on an ACT or an SAT in high school.
Yeah.
And so, the fact that, if you look at, go look up Mike Benz, you're talking to a guy who's never voted for Donald Trump as president in 3 years. Oh, by the way, I'm, Republican, Democrat. I'm kind of in the middle now. I just, I like to make my determination based on the person. But Mike Benz has laid out very clearly, because it's all come to light, about how, we as the US have been funding opioids, aka poppies, to be planted in Afghanistan to then sell back through to make sure there's instability and drugs, flowing into the United States. I mean, it's everything that we kind of have been pushing against for the 15 years I've been in the industry, the regulated industry. I wasn't in the illicit market. I've always been in the regulated market, and man, has it changed a lot. And boy, was it scary when, they pulled the Cole memo.
Yeah.
But that was real. Right now we're just battling and trying to kick down the last few dominoes, quite frankly. So, even though, Jushi, who's, $250+ million revenue with, 45 to 50 million bucks of EBITDA and massive growth, and somehow we're going to go bankrupt. That's what my stock tells me every single day, which couldn't be further from the truth. But again, that's a conversation for another day. But
wild story. This whole industry in this country is, it just when you think you understand everything or don't understand everything, something across your plate. Like, what do you think is going through Donald Trump's head when he sees something, reads something like that?
I think he says, hell yeah, fuck yeah, I disclose that. I really do. Like, I think he got the strong message from the United States, the people, the constituents, one of the few people that have actually listened to the constituents in an elected position, and he's doing something about it. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat or independent. The shit that's coming out right now, I mean, good. They deserve it.
Yeah.
Badly needed, overdue, to say the least. I guess the model here, or the message here that you just signed us, is follow our vision or you're fired, regardless of who is basically added into Trump's cabinet, correct?
It's Don's the judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah.
I think that's very clear. I think that's been very clear for the last, 3-4 weeks. And look, there's a lot of really, really important stuff that he's doing right now. And he's just getting his cabinet in place. Like, you got to realize Pam Bondi's only been there for a couple of weeks. His chief of staff is the only one that's, really there helping out.
And she's well versed. She's well versed on the cannabis industry.
Absolutely.
Her background in Florida, they were the architects of the MMTC program down here. Susie Wiles knows damn well what the cannabis industry stands for and how a regulated market works.
Pam Bondi was a partner in a law firm that a lot of folks won those original licenses from.
Yeah.
Yep.
Trust me, I know.
I
was one of those 5. So
Trent, want to ask you something here. Like, we're a podcast here. We got to look at things from both angles. And Tom Angel from Marijuana Moment wrote earlier, contextually, it should be noted that Jushi was also optimistic about Youngkin as Virginia governor, and we know how that turned out in response to some of the optimism that you're thinking with regards to how things could work out with this Trump administration related to Terry Coleas. Like, how do you respond to something like that?
Yeah, look, I was optimistic because I could never square the box of how you can let $3.5 billion of cannabis flow to the cartels.
Yeah.
He wasn't the guy that was there when they legalized cannabis. Heard loud and clear. But I think it is extremely short-sighted, and quite frankly, a public safety faux pas by somebody who doesn't really understand the real world. Somebody that's worth $400 million, who probably doesn't, see what's going on in communities around the Commonwealth or around the United States. And so, yeah, we were hopeful that he would come in and he's, again, very smart man. You don't become the co-CEO of Carlyle for being a slouch. But it also is very clear he understands, and he is part of the swamp, no matter what people want to say.
Oh, absolutely.
Because Carlyle is a big time government, government grants and so on and so forth. So, I think Governor Youngkin, needs to continue to educate himself. He came out with like 4 or 5 points as to, why he thinks a regulated cannabis market, an adult use cannabis market, shouldn't be there. I think you'll see some coverage on some counterpoints to that, because quite frankly, we have a lot. So, I don't know if you guys remember in 8 Mile when, B Rabbit went to do his last rap battle, calls out everything they had against him. And then he says, tell me something they don't know. Well, he's already tipped his hand once because he's vetoed it once. I hope he has some new updated information to veto it for a second time.
I saw that press conference that Youngkin did. He might as well have been Kevin Sabat sitting up there just reciting Sam's talking points from a bullet from a teleprompter. It was just all contrary to popular belief and data. There was data against every claim that he made about public safety. It was that was one of
that's what happens when you're so powerful. God comes down and talks to you, and then you go with it blindly. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Is he retiring? He's not up for re-election.
He's out.
Correct?
He's out in 26.
You can't in Virginia. You cannot be governor for 2 consecutive terms.
Good to know.
He could theoretically be gone for 4 years and come back, but there will be 2 new gubernatorial nominees. Not quite sure who the Republican will be, but U.S. Congress, U.S. Representative. Her name is Abigail Spanberger.
Okay.
Kind seems to be the one the Democrats are coalescing around. Badass woman. Woman.
Yeah.
Former CIA, very smart individual. And so I think
Trent, what do people from Virginia say? Like, do they want this to be passed and adult use to become legalized?
It pulls 65+%.
Yeah.
When you ask the question, and this is not just in Pennsylvania, or this is not just in Virginia, this is in Pennsylvania. Quite frankly, this is a nationwide thing. I don't know if you guys saw the Pew poll, but for the Pew poll, which is very real, medical and adult use was 58%, maybe even higher.
It was higher.
63, maybe in the low 60s. But then when you add medical, should just be medical, it was another 23% or something along those lines. So it gets to the high 80s, low 90s for national. And so what people don't understand when you poll cannabis, you shouldn't, the question to ask is not, do you think cannabis should be legal? Yes or no? Because you're going to get, high 50s, low 60s.
Right.
You can't ask it in a vacuum. You have to say, because there is an illicit market out there. There is a gray market out there with THCA and Delta 9 hemp and all that stuff. And so You have to say, do you want status quo, which is what's in your community right now? Because people know those smoke shops and those hemp stores and the gas stations don't age verify. Their product's not third-party tested.
Right.
Just none of that. Just none of that. And so when you ask the question, do you want status quo or do you want regulated tax cannabis? It's into the 70s. Quite frankly, it's into the 90s in certain states, but in Virginia, it's in the 70s. And so, unfortunately, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, one man can block popular belief. I don't know how long you last in politics when you go against that, especially nowadays after the 2024 election. Ask Kamala how that went.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens in Florida too in 26 with DeSantis having to leave, and it's going to be an issue. Adult use is going to come up in the gubernatorial race. I don't think anybody will miss Youngkin or DeSantis.
Yeah, it's interesting. You hear all the time, oh man, I smell weed in public. That was the big rally cry in Florida for DeSantis.
Yeah.
Like, you do realize you can't pop an open container and just, continue to drink on the street in most places. I mean, okay, maybe Vegas and maybe certain parts of New Orleans, but in Florida, you get in trouble, you get a ticket.
Right.
That's because you regulate the product, and then law enforcement knows when somebody's doing something wrong. And so when you have no rules, when you have no guidelines, it turns into the wild, wild west. And you're going to smell people smoking cigarettes and smoking weed and drinking wherever. All of those things when you don't regulate something. I mean, I watch people freebase, crack cocaine walking around Denver.
I've seen that downtown
and a lot of other places too, by the way.
Saw that. Anthony and I were there. Man, I don't want to see that. I don't want a lot of people to see that. But unless you're enforcing it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the thing is, people too that argue with the smell. I would argue that there's just as high of a concentration as people using hemp products as if we had an adult use market in the state of Florida, and you can't smell shit. You
do have an adult use market. I mean,
it's hemp.
Yeah, it's hemp. And by the way, the governor vetoed that bill to make that the case. Yeah. And so people are like, thank you, God. Let's go.
Look,
the people that don't care about it, quite frankly.
If people become more educated in the industry and you regulate it, I think you would actually probably see public consumption of cannabis actually, where you're walking into the park and stuff like that, actually come down, in my opinion. You guys don't think?
You won't see it.
You don't see it. Yeah. You don't see it. The only place
in Denver, I hardly ever smell weed.
Yeah, the only place that I've actually walked around and smelled weed in public are New York City and San Francisco. That's it.
Yeah.
Aside from that, Denver, never. Miami, never.
Richmond, Virginia, you walk around and you smell weed. Yeah. Honestly, because it's not regulated, and there is a plethora of THCA flower floating around.
Yeah.
So
that's a whole
maybe that changes his mind this year. I don't know.
Yeah. So. Well, listen, we reached out to a few people from U.S. Cannabis Roundtable. They had a press release that came out and just said they're looking forward to working with the Trump administration. So I understand where they're coming from, but there really wasn't a lot more than that press release. But glad to know that we got a chance to connect with you today, because once we learned that, with your footprint in Virginia and some of the relationships that you built with Terry Cole, it was like a no-brainer to have you on, just to shed some light on who he is, what his background is, but more importantly, what you think his stance will be and what the Trump's administration stance will be. But loud and clear, hopefully you're accurate, but I can't help but think that you're right, because if you're, like you said, the third to fourth pick in line, usually, I don't know how much authority you have or influence you have in some of these decisions, but with the way Trump's running the ship right now, listen or you're out, right?
Absolutely. And again, I'll say it one more time, because the third time is the charm and it sticks. I'm stealing it from Trump because he says things 3 times all the time. But this guy is Terry Cole. He focuses on fentanyl and cartels. That's what his focus is on. 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. I know that for a fact. I mean, I've had multiple people tell me that. And so in order, to make that happen, there was a CNN article that talked about the spy planes flying over the border. Nobody seems to pay attention to that. Like they are after this. They are like, white on rice. Dogs sniffing for a bone. And so again, every dollar that moves, towards the legal market is a dollar less for the cartels. Just the case.
Yeah. And I think finally that's going to ring home, especially when you look at outside of all that too. And that is extremely important, probably the most important thing as far as safety, but you have to factor into with what Donald Trump stands for. And it's the economic angle as well.
We need to get
America first.
If it's going to take 6 months to a year for his, plan to finally get into like full motion and recover this economy, sooner or later, at some point, he's going to need cannabis. And I know
it's funny. Go ahead, Chad.
I was just going to say it's not a major priority at this point right now. There's other things and I can understand with what they're doing and it's good. But, what we're trying to communicate to people here is that we're not trying to pump the tires or pump the industry. The reality is right now we're in a lot of unknowns. But what we do know is that what we hear and see and the network that we have is the same thing that you continue to reiterate is Donald Trump is all about America first. And he is going to make a lot of these decisions in the DOJ versus a head of the DEA, and the right people are speaking to him right now to educate him on the cannabis industry.
Yeah, I was gonna say people keep talking about needing to go like protest in Washington. Need to just round up the damn Florida patients and go in front of Mar-a-Lago and get some signs that are every dollar for the legal market is a dollar less for the cartel. You want to get Donald Trump's attention? Go out in front of Mar-a-Lago. Don't even bother DC.
And look. Last time I checked, Jushi's got well north of 350, 400 million bucks of CapEx into the ground in the United States. I'm a small fish in a big pond.
Yep.
I'd love to ask that question to Curaleaf, GTI, Cresco, so on and so forth. I mean, as an industry, we have probably $10+ billion of infrastructure spend. We have 500,000 people working in the industry. We generate hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of taxes at the state level. Nothing for the federal level. In a world where, thank God they are cutting taxes. Thank God, or not cutting taxes, but finding, spend on, shitty things that my tax dollars have been going to for a long, long time. But there's another part of that equation too. You don't just need to cut. You can also raise taxes through garnering business back into the United States. Last time I checked, cannabis is,
in America,
$100 billion. That's probably light. It's probably like closer to 150 billion bucks. Put a quick excise tax on that. Wow, that's a couple billion bucks a year. Man, that'd be fucking nice to start filling the gap. Now it's a drop in the bucket when you talk about trillions, but it's a start.
Yeah. Trump creates 500,000 jobs with banking reform. Imagine flexing 500,000 new jobs created with the signature, writes Mitch on Twitter. He's right. And we've had a lot of those conversations over the last couple of weeks. I think Tyler Burline over at Safe Harbor. We had him on a couple of weeks ago, and he knows for a fact that there are people speaking with Trump right now about that stat that I just outlined. And it's definitely grabbed his attention. So there's a great example as to the right people are speaking to him directly, and he's becoming more and more educated.
And I posted online a couple weeks ago, letters from TD Ameritrade getting kicked out back in 2018. U.S. Bank, which I had, since I was born. Yeah. Luckily, I was able to get my parents off the account, so they didn't get kicked off too in 2018. I got rejected from Mercedes-Benz for a 12-month lease on cash I had in my bank account. Well, excess covered the loan amount. They reject me. I had to have my dad co-sign. It was like a 32-year-old individual. Like, it's embarrassing. I got kicked out of Chase about a year back. So it affects all of us. I'm one of many. And I appreciate you guys having me on to be able to share the insight, because there's hundreds of thousands of us just like it, that quite frankly get fucked every day because we don't have access to a traditional financial system.
Agreed. Listen, appreciate your time. Let's keep in touch. I know we're going to be probably doing a little bit more content on your company moving forward too, because we look at the state of Virginia, we look at Ohio and how that's progressing. And the next darling story that's starting to build more and more momentum is the great state of Pennsylvania. So we're going to learn more about Jushi related to that, because I think the next steps that we need to start doing in the coming months is looking at specific companies that could move and move most within this industry based on their current footprint. And Anthony and I are going to be shedding some light on who some of those companies are. So we will make sure to follow up with you and do more of that and talk more about these key markets that you're in. Sound good?
Awesome. Appreciate it, guys.
All right. Thanks, Trent. Let's keep in touch.
Take care.
Yeah. Everyone Trent's only been on once before and it's been a while, but I just think you all need to understand the reason why we had him on. We did reach out to the U.S. Cannabis Roundtable. They had a press release that was, we need to find more information. Like, does anybody have relationships that they know Terry Cole personally? Trent was at the forefront. It's the reason why we brought him on. And I think we learned a lot there on some of his feedback.
Yeah, I really think that Florida patients need to mobilize in front of Mar-a-Lago. You want to get Donald's attention. That's his stronghold. That really is a stronghold. I think that'd be way more effective than Washington. Good
night, Governor Ron DeSantis. That would change things like that.
Well, not even in regard to Florida adult use, because Trump already tried to influence Florida adult
use. I get
use
that.
And it got steamrolled.
It put him in his place, though.
If you want to get on Trump's radar as an industry, needs to be Mar-a-Lago, not Washington, D.C.
Matthew SoCal, did I hear that correctly? Anthony is planning a weed reform protest at Mar-a-Lago. I can't believe he's going to show up too.
I'll go play golf next door once we're done.
Yeah, man. What did you buy that property for again back in the day?
No idea.
Crazy. It was next to nothing.
Smooth $500,000 to sign up at Trump West Palm.
Do you drive by there?
Yeah, I mean, it's too far from I played there, but it's too far from my house.
With respect to Florida's future, I mean, Byron Donalds also opposes legalizing marijuana despite having been arrested for marijuana. Yeah.
So he voted yes on SAFE. He did vote yes on SAFE. He was against Amendment 3. But I do think that it's going to come up in the gubernatorial race. So we're going to find out people's perspective on the future of adult use in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
Let's see if Mr. Donalds changes his tune. And let's also see who else is running. If it's Casey DeSantis, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
She'll just be another disciple against A3.
To your point, Tom,
whatever the new iteration is.
To your point, Tom, it's something we alluded to actually a week and a half ago with Brady. The conversation is happening. And even though, let's say, adult use didn't pass, which it didn't back in November, it only increases the level of attention and conversation that pertains to it. It's inevitable. It's only a matter of time before the people will speak and win. And if you get some sort of rescheduling announced during this Trump administration, think of the impact that'll have as far as education and acceptance amongst a lot of people that are on the other side right now across the country.
Yeah.
All right, listen, Eric Berlin.
I've never been called a perma-dem. I don't even know what the hell that means.
Perma-dem? Where am I seeing that? Who wrote that?
I think I blocked that guy on Twitter actually a long time ago.
Did you?
Yeah, just disregard him.
Oh, some guy went rogue on us last night. He was calling me Opie. And I forget you. And like, are you guys going to go down to one podcast per week? This industry is going to blow up. And I'm just like, bring it on, man. Love the haters. But if anything,
there's a lot of miserable people on Twitter. There's a lot of good people. There's a lot of random people that I just talk to daily on Twitter, but there's a lot of miserable people on Twitter. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
Permanent Democrat. I don't know if he thinks I'm a Democrat, judging by watching the show. I don't know what to tell him. I don't know what I've ever done to elicit that.
He's from Southern Florida, owns a gun. Yeah.
A lot more than that.
Yeah, exactly. Too. We won't get into that.
Yeah.
That's all I meant. He says, I miss Gretchen's input today. I don't know where she is, but we'll make sure.
Gretchen is probably on the hill with Don.
Yeah. She's putting in her time and effort. So we got to have her on. But Eric Berlin from Denton's is going to come on. We're going to talk to him later this week, talk about rescheduling, maybe share some of the thoughts that Shane had on Monday. But in the event that there is a ruling, I'd like to get an idea from him as to how that would look and if it's possible. So we'll talk about that on Friday with him. And then we'll also confirm You hate Trump.
I hate Trump. I don't hate Trump.
This guy's just totally. He's being a smartass.
He doesn't watch the show. I can support Trump, but I can also call him a narcissistic maniac, and still support the man. That doesn't mean I hate him. It means I just call it how it is.
Yeah, all good. Sorry, great show. There you go. Anyway, appreciate everybody for logging on here today. Hope you all had some great feedback. Give this video a like if you like the content we produced. Some of the questions that we had with Beena. If there's anything we missed, leave your comments below. We'll reach out to the team and get back to you right away on some of the feedback pertains to it. As usual, make sure to scan that QR code and subscribe to our Baked In newsletter, giving you all big wrap up of the latest on, like we said, Terry Cole, what his appointment means. If in case you missed this live stream, you can check out more information tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time by subscribing to our Baked In newsletter that's delivered to your inbox Monday through Fridays at 8 a.m. Eastern time. In the meantime, my friend, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll check back in with you here Friday morning, 11 a.m. with Mr. Eric Berlin.
Oh, he is on Friday?
He is on.
Nice.
It's coming on Friday.
J. Cole is better than Terry Cole, Guap. That is correct.
All right. I don't know how much more.
Good.
Yeah, it was
cut
not
it, Arns.
Yeah, cut it. Now that was a good one. What'd you guys all think? Did you like what we had to say here today? Do you agree, disagree with what we're saying? Love to get your feedback. As usual, leave comments below. Trade to Black is growing, and we wouldn't have done it without you. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Apple and Spotify for the audio version. And as usual, leave lots of comments. We, as I said, love to hear back from you. Thanks again, everybody, for watching.